Everybody, welcome back to Swing Trading. Great to be back with you folks. I've been thinking about swing trading quite a bit as we've been seeing a number of different potential setups in terms of different price patterns out there in the market, actually from last week. Some of those have developed. We'll take a look at those in a little bit more detail. We've got one to review, but today I wanted to take a look specifically at some of the pivot points. Pivot points are an interesting kind of a setup that a lot of intraday or shorter term traders will look at, like on a 30-minute, but normally a 5-minute chart. That sort of time frame entry is unique. It's different from some of our other sort of trigger type entries off of, let's say, a flag pattern or other price patterns. With this pattern, we're seeing a totally different set of trading rules that apply. We'll go ahead and dive into those specifically, but those can help us with the timing right around the end or the potential end of a flag pattern. So I'll look forward to diving on into that with you folks. It's great to be back with you. As always, I'm joined in the chat by a good friend, colleague of mine, Connie Hill. Great to have Connie here on board, a CMT herself. She carries a CMT designation. Great to have Connie here. Very knowledgeable with stocks and trading, specifically in terms of stocks, charts, and things along these lines with the CMT. You can follow us both on X, Connie Hill CS. Mine is Mike Fairborn CS. And hello to you. We've got Joba, we've got Chuck, Kevin. Hello to you guys. Alfie, Chris B, Robert, Ted, Will, Kelly, JD, Reggie Riceberg, and Beth, and another Robert as well. So welcome to all of you folks. Let's hit some disclosure items to get the show on the road here. But great to be with you. All right, information here is for general information purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation. Now, as it states here, the paper money software application is for educational purposes only. Investing does involve risk, including the loss of principal. Now, there's no guarantee that execution of a stop order will be at or near the stop price, and past performance is no guarantee of future results. Dividends are not guaranteed either. Finally, there are some futures disclosures. We do reference those from time to time. Futures and futures options trading does involve substantial risk, not suitable for all investors. And we do have the Stacks index. We can take a look at that a little bit later. Actually, I don't even have, you know what, we'll save that for our Wednesday class, okay, where we look at the Stacks. But that did just come out for those of you that do follow that. Not really specific too much to this class, just on the front of my mind is all. All right, folks, well, those are your futures and other disclosures you've got right there. And just a quick note, as we take a look at some of the common patterns that we'll see within swing trading, specifically there's your bull flag. A lot of times with the price patterns that are so useful is you do get price projection ranges, like, say, for example, that's a price projection range right there to the upside. And you're just kind of measuring this move right here in price to this move measured off the bottom. These could be very interesting, but they do tend to encompass that 3 to 15 day time frame right in there. A lot of traders will actually take this time frame up to a one month time frame or less. You know, maybe that high. I have seen swing traders do that, but generally it's within normal, you know, kind of a shorter term time frame, maybe a 2-week time frame, 1 week to 2 weeks or so. So just keep that parked in the back of your mind. But yeah, a flag is a very, very common sort of a formation. We'll be looking at in the context of, and there's one to the downside, but this area right here, I want to circle it while we've got it. It's a pretty good diagram to sort of illustrate what we're after here. But as you get down towards the bottom, potential bottom of a flag, something interesting can happen on a pivot point. And yes, I'll just say, well, spell that out for short, pivot point, or abbreviated, I should say, pivot point. And what we're looking at here is, what does that pivot point show us on that 5-minute chart? Folks, it is different. It is unique, and it can be interesting. So we do, after we'll take a quick look at the markets here, I do want to review a full discussion on pivot points so you understand how they could fit on a price pattern, inverse head and shoulders patterns, triangles, diamond type patterns, of course, flag patterns as well. A lot of different patterns out there that we can swing trade, and there's going to be others that you could just look at. In fact, some might just look at a pivot point bouncing off of an interesting support level, for example, if you're looking for an upside move. But what we do is we take that pivot point and we zoom in here and say, we're not looking at closing above the high to low day. We're not looking at trend lines. We're looking at actual price data to show that a pivot point has changed. And that, when it does occur, that would present a potential entry point for the start of the move. And it is fascinating when those are placed on a daily, using multiple time frames now, a daily chart pattern. Okay, so let's do it. Let's take a look at our markets here. And we'll pull that up. Where are you? There you are. Oh, yeah, perfect. Okay, we might take a look at Apple here in just a moment. But first off, let's take a look at the markets just super briefly here. We did have a little bit of a recovery, and as you can see in our markets, in fact, I'll zoom in on that too, right here on the S&P 500. A quick note here is that we did bounce, and you'll notice one thing that we have to state, because this is the case. This is the case right now, and that is it's a higher low still. And I know we've been saying higher lows for a long time, which is a good problem to have if you want that uptrend to continue. Just keep on saying it. Higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low. That is a higher low. Now, will it continue to make a higher high and confirm a trend rise to the upside? That's the question. But a pretty good bounce, you have to say nonetheless. And generally what we'll do, we can look at price patterns to the downside when the trend is down, but when the trend is up in the markets, a lot of times we are looking for those flag patterns, folks, that do in fact follow in the direction of what? Well, maybe the market itself. We don't necessarily like headwinds in this class. We like tailwinds. We like to be on maybe the right side of the market, although there are some stocks that will go counter to the market. This is 500 companies here, the S&P 500, approximately 500, and many of those will tend to go up when the market goes up. Okay, so with all that, we're going to take a look at our trade from last week, DHR, Danaher, and it did dip down a little bit. I know that we said, one of the scenarios we said, hey, if it begins to dip a little bit lower, there could be an exit. We only did a very small entry position here of 25 shares. I've elected to keep that in as we've just made a higher high over here and bouncing. And you can see maybe today, perhaps the market's not done yet, but maybe we'll get a close above the high to low day. Could it be poised for a rally here? Well, that's the question. But you can kind of see a little bit of a move, a flag pattern. Well, will it go? That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens if we do get a follow through in the markets. Historically, November tends to be a pretty good month. But what I want to do is I want to use our example trade to add to this position. It's an expensive stock at $250, which is why we only did the initial 25 shares. And so maybe we can add an additional 25 shares today as an example, if in fact we have that pivot point indication. So just like I'd shown on this diagram right here, as we're looking at this area on a potential flag, and you can kind of see the flag here, the possibility of a flag here, right, that we'd looked at. Come on, there you are. And you're getting some of these sort of a longer term possible flag. Will it set up and take off now? And can we flag higher and go from here? Which was the original reason why we're looking at this guy in the first place. So having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you guys the pivot points. Now, some traders, it's frequently used like on futures trading, but traders can use it also on charts, stock charts as well. Okay, and so I've got a second, actually pull it up. I've just got this saved in the background here. So these are the pivot points, and let me show you how you can add them on first so you're aware of where they're at and what's going on. I'll explain the details of what's going on here too. First off, we go up to our little dropper icon, and there it is. You can see it right there. Now keep in mind that there are some additional pivot points in there. This one is just simply, just type in PIV. PIV. These are all the pivot points. I mean, you've got persons, you've got Woodies. This is just the main one, pivot points. If you double click on that, I've got the exact same one I have, and I'm just using the default, folks. That's it. I click OK, And it does provide these lines here on the chart. Now, actually, it's all derived off of actually one pivot point, and this is the main pivot point line right here. If you add those in, they will be the exact same colors on your chart as I have on mine. Of course, keep in mind I'm using that black background, so it might look a little bit different on the white background. This is your key pivot point. The other lines you've got up top here, this is referred to as resistance 1 and resistance 2. Down below, you've got a support 1, just conversely to the downside. Oh, and there's a 1 and a support 2 right there. So resistance 1, resistance 2, support 1, support 2, and these are really interesting. They can act as support and resistance levels for kind of that trigger trade where prices might really start to move. Keep in mind, again, this is just a 1-day, 5-minute chart. But folks, it is quite relevant. 1 day, 5 minute is relevant to our discussion here because why are we using the pivot points here? Remember what it was? It was at the end of what? What pattern were we looking at? We're still looking at DHR. And we saw a move occur today. There's a lot of bars, so I understand the confusion here, but I really want to, pound this point down. Where are we at when we're looking at the flag pattern, the daily flag? This is the 5-minute. This is the start of the potential start of that move on higher. And we're simply just referencing a way that traders will frequently use for intraday type strong moves. And sometimes what can happen is, boom, something like this can really get us going, a break above this line, okay? The resistance 1 line, which is exactly how some traders will trade the pivot point systems. This is the methodology I teach when I fill in for futures for Ben on Tuesdays. Okay, Chris, it was the flag. That's exactly right. And by the way, hello to all you just joining us right now. We're just talking about ways that traders will try to find higher expectations of a move going forward after. Okay, I've got to get this set up here a little better. 1 second. I want to do this. Let's do this here. I got to make this easier to flip back and forth with. Okay, this is it. Just 1 sec, folks. I still can't get there. Okay. All right, that's okay. We'll just go back and forth here. Okay, so that's no problem. So all we're looking at is this was kind of a blowing up of this shorter term time frame right there. That's what we're doing. That's what we're looking at. And when you get a certain type of a pivot point break, that's a pivot point bounce or breakout, depending upon what we're looking at. Okay, a quick note on that is this right here. I just went ahead and sent this through because I do want you guys to understand. This is just right off my X handle here. I wanted you to know the formulas so you know what's going on. What is drawing those lines? And by the way, they're all used. I'll just pull this up again real quick. They're all used. Each one of these lines is used from the prior day data. It's all from the previous day. But there have been enough indications historically that traders will use these and they'll say, gosh, I get a lot of bounces along here. I see a lot of different indications that will come up at certain levels. For example, case in point, notice when you broke higher, you stopped right at this line. You stopped, you broke right up above it and you hit here. Folks, there's no other way to find this line. I mean, there's no other indication for it except for pivot points. And the pivot point calculation right there is based on yesterday's data. So the open high, low and close of yesterday. What is that formula? Here it is. So that pivot point, there's your main pivot point, okay? You just take the high plus the low plus the close, you divide it by 3 of yesterday. And from that, we've got this equals the pivot point, or the P for short. You times that by 2 minus the low, you get your R1, you get your R2. These are the calculations, and it has these numbers listed down below. Or I should say, kind of a legend down below that you can reference here, so you understand the math that's going in behind it. But it is a method that's frequently used by a lot of these intraday traders, and I just figured, hey, why don't we use this at the end of a price pattern, whatever that is, triangle, head and shoulders. In this case, it's a flag pattern from last week's discussion. All right, now let me explain to you exactly how this particular system can work. It's a very common method used for it. And I'll explain why some traders would, they think there would just be a higher expectation of a follow through up or down once these lines get taken out. Okay. So what I've got right here is, and I want to highlight this. In fact, I don't want to make it too confusing, but there is this volume weighted average price, which a lot of traders will just use. I'm just going to throw this as kind of like a bonus. I'm just going to keep it on here. I was going to take it off, but I'm going to keep it on. Some traders will say, if you average the volume relative to price, we should be above this line if we are bulls, and we should be bearish. Traders will be bearish if it's below that line, but you can see prices are above that line. A little side note, little bonus items I mentioned that can oftentimes frequently be added or combined with pivot points. Okay. All on an intraday time frame nonetheless, still the same. All right, so this is the methodology on how many traders will use these pivot point setups. Along the pivot point, okay, this can be used if prices are below here and they break above here, that can be considered a buy entry. I'm just going to say it plus, like somebody's adding to this, or they're buying it here, okay? They're buying a position. We're just going to look at the upside on this one. People would look on the downside elsewhere in a different way, but we're just looking at the upside right now. We'll make it nice and simple here. That can be an issue, but the problem is that with this pivot point, prices can go up or down around that pivot. It's a really key distinguishing point. Is somebody going to sell a position? Are they going to do something else? Are they going to buy, whatever the case they're doing? In other words, if they have a long position, are they going to get out? That's what I mean by sell. Whatever the case is, if it goes below there. But there's kind of a decision factor here. That is totally different with the R1. And I'll explain why. So at resistance 1, as we're zooming in, is we could just have this pivot point up. All you're looking for at the end of a flag pattern developing, can we break above that R1 level like we did right here? Because if we can break above the R1, that is how there's no downside here that a trader might use by getting out of a position. That is showing strength relative to pivot points. Okay. Now, sometimes they will trade this up to an R2 and get out of that trade. Believe me, they actually trade that short a time frame. Like I said, it's intraday time frame. But this can be a very interesting point and potentially a powerful entry at the end of a daily flag trade for the swing trade. Because we're just looking for, are we really seeing some signs here, according to the pivot point, that this right there is really starting to roll. Now, is there, that's what they'll look for. Now, nothing's 100%, but that's why we look at these to try to find even what some traders would look at as even greater expectations. Some might look at that and just say, that's, if I can get above an R1 with some strength, we might get rolling at that point in time. In other words, the flag might then, on a daily chart right over here, into the future, I'll just highlight it with yellow, may continue then to do one of these and extend up to our price target. It's a fascinating little entry point. All right. But that is the R1 level using the prior day's data. And that's what I love about this, because the prior day's data has something to do with the prior day's data over here, which has something to do with going back in time. And if we're looking at that data, we're really referencing that data and saying, when are we really seeing strength according to the pivot points with that prior set of data? When is it really changing? Well, according to this, it would have changed right there. What was that level? I want to look at this on the daily chart so you guys could really piece this together with me. 213.05. Let's do it. Let's go back, because remember, it was all about this chart. 213.05. I'm just going to put a line right there, right about in there somewhere. 213.05. Okay. 213. I'm getting close. I can't quite get it because it's adjusting a little bit higher. There's 213.01. Wow. What did that do? It said, clearly above the Cajole. The Cajole required even less, but this required a little bit more. Over here, over here. And look at this. It's actually like over into this range. It's interesting. It's a different way to look at it. So that could suggest some strength, and that's what you're looking for. And I would say that sometimes you might get a hold, but it might not be quite ready to run. Maybe some traders might be looking for further signs, further indications of a breakout move. Now, any questions on that? I'll just take a look real quick and just see where we're at. Yeah, those pivots are fascinating, Kelly, and others. It's a different way. You'd never know. You'd never know about that line. I mean, look at how obscure is 213.05. We don't even, I mean, it doesn't even list it here, but it's breaking down what, futures traders would say higher expectations for a move. And they're looking for they want to try to find the indications when prices might be going up or down. And so that's what we're using here. But that would be, there could be other things we've talked about here, of course, other indications, but these are pivot points. Okay, so it looks like we're okay. How effective is it on a daily chart, says Chuck? Well, do I have that data right now at my fingertips? I don't, but I want you to think about what it's doing. It's taking all of the prior data and kind of adding up, because each one is similar to the prior one. It's saying, where is a change above a resistance 1 level? Where are we seeing a sort of an intraday explosive move? Because what we're looking for here is that trigger, right, to get it going. So, take a look at it. We're going to do this. I know we're a little bit late on this trade, but I wanted to highlight it first before we put on an additional, 25 shares in here. But once these get broken, these can be construed as or considered support levels too, right? Because they can be support points. You can see just like right here, resistance, resistance, support. So these could also be areas where, using the same point, if prices were to come down and do what? Bounce, whatever we want to define a bounce as, using a break above a moving average or whatever, it is 5 minutes still, but they can still be used as an interesting sort of a bounce as we're waiting for that longer term target to maybe take effect. Okay, so with this move and this break, although we didn't get the ideal one, in fact, we're a couple points higher, I still want to just go through just so we can mark this and keep it in line for this particular trade that we're looking at right now. Let's see, let me just go back to it here. We'll just go back to our chart here. Of course, we could place trades over on the right-hand side as well, just so you know, in that active trader, right? But we'll just do it well, let's just use it here. Active trader, it was only 25 shares. Let's drop that guy down and enter this paper money trade right now. Oh, by market. There we go. Boom. Okay, I'm just doing a market order right there. Okay, so now we've entered our order based on this entry here for that setup for a pivot point break. All right. We're not exactly, I mean, somebody using just the pivots, they might have actually, believe it or not, I mean, because it is a futures, some will choose to use it on an intraday basis. They might be just taking a move like this. But this is more relevant because it's at the end of a potential flag pattern. We got a little bit of a follow through. All right. Oh yeah, so this is it right here. So yeah, this is cool. Want to make sure you got that. So I'm glad you're asking some questions about this specifically. Come over here and just when you're in the charts, click on the edit studies right there. Now within this edit studies, what you're going to want to do is just, everything's in alphabetical order here. I'll just go to it this way, but you can type it in up top as well. It's just simply pivot points right there. You can learn more about it right there. You can double click on it and voila, you've got it. So it's not necessarily a script. It's just an indicator that's used. You guys notice this too. Now, many of you that have gone to my class before, you will have seen this indicator and I put it down here because why not? This is the TTM squeeze and we've discussed this. In fact, we built some scripts around it too within the ThinkScript class on Thursday But this is when the Bollinger Band goes within the Keltner channel, and you have extreme levels of low volatility, which can be followed by breakout movement. This is fascinating right here because you had that point show up even on a 5-minute chart. You came out of that, and a lot of times when you get volatility compression here, folks, it can lead to volatility expansion. Expand, da-da-da, expand. Just another indication to keep an eye on top of our VWAP. We're full of all kinds of just intraday or shorter term stuff today. But remember, it's always in the context of that multiple time frame for a bigger setup. But did that help, right? I hope you got that all settled and that made sense there. Okay, yeah, just showing it. So it's not a specific script. Yeah, you can put it on the daily chart, but here's the thing, Chuck. It's still, it's interesting because it's still giving you the same exact calculations as you'd see on the daily chart. This is it. This is what you'd see. So if you put on the daily chart, you're just going to see like dots showing up. You're going to get it because it's all based upon this still. It's just short term. You get to see those intraday, how they could be represented on the chart. Okay. Let me just put this in. If you guys want to take a look at this, I'll put it into the chat. You can reference these formulas for pivot points. It was just specifically done for you guys on this webcast here, so you'd have it down. Yes, it did. So Kelly, very astute. It did break out, and that's exactly why we have it there. Kelly, it can break out of these TTM squeezes as well. You'll notice that. So when you get compression, and what are we getting right now? We just got our very first sign of compression, but you got to kind of remind yourself, gosh, we've looked at these on a daily chart. At least we did in the ThinkScript class. This is a 5-minute. But is this irrelevant? Is this an interesting area on the 5-minute? It is. It is in this sense that it's part of a flag pattern. That's why it's of interest. It could start to follow through there. So I figured, hey, we could use these tools on a short-term basis, particularly for this class, because we can use it across a number of different sort of price patterns as well that could be utilized here. All right, and I think Connie, yeah, okay, Chris got that too. Yeah, I think Connie's got us all caught up, so perfect. Yeah, it's not exactly designed for longer term timeframes at all, but it's designed as that trigger, and we're putting it on a longer term pattern on a daily chart. So we're actually tapping into a couple of different timeframes there, Lakshmi. All right, great. All right, well, it's time for us to move into maybe some other scenarios, other setups here. We talked about this class or this stock last week, BG, and it may be starting to get moving a little bit. This is Bunge. Some people call it Bunge. I think it's Bunge, actually, is how it's pronounced. But they are tied into, soybeans, and they do a lot with soybeans themselves. And soybeans, as you guys might have noted, there have been some work through the administration to get soybeans repurchased, I guess, by the Chinese again, and there have been some success there. You see on the soybeans chart, now we're looking at actual futures. We're just going to stocks because that's what we do in this class, but there's a nice little gap on futures right there. A little bit of a sideways range, but looking into it, just a little total side note, but I think it was something like the Chinese were making 60% of our soybean purchases. And I should do this, because these guys have the largest percentage of soybeans, Bunge does, in at least in terms of the stock out there that, I don't think there's any larger one in the U.S., but at least according to what I could find, don't quote me on that, there could be. That's just a glance, though, of your soybeans with low purchases, I guess, for the Chinese. And so could there be room to run here? Sure. Could there be room to run on BG? Well, sure, there could be. Maybe it could come out of its base and rally. That's kind of the run right there. So I was just saying, hey, like we talked about last week, we were waiting to see if we would get an additional sign. We did get earnings, and we're past earnings now. They beat earnings a little bit, I guess by like a few cents, 5 cents or so on that possibly. And then maybe this could be a flag and a rally. Got a strong gap there, and this is actually coming across a large range. So again, we do everything. If we look at pivot points, it's simply just a sort of an entry strategy into that price pattern, which in this case is the bull flag. So let's do this. Let's jump right into those pivots and let's just see what this guy looks like right now. All right, did we get an indication there? Did we get the break? We've been sitting at some lower lines for a while now, perhaps a few days, but notice it's fascinating. Folks, there might not be any prior moves on a chart over here, but look how it goes. It ran right up to it and stopped. This is based on the prior day move, right? Which is tied into other prior days prices. Look at that. Sometimes it's just uncanny how it can hold these levels. It breaks above, and where does it come down and retouch? Exactly, or right near, I should say, our resistance 1. After we rally up, where does it come right down to? The resistance 1 again. You're not going to find this line anywhere else. It's based on prior days calculations using pivot point calculations, okay? But notice, could there have been an entry right here as you broke out? Yes. Breaking above and closing above that line above R1, according to people that are using it and using it in this methodology, there's two things there, right? First of all, they got to be using pivots, and they're using this methodology, though. You're getting it lined up. Now, folks, if we just stand back from this, there is something more that I think many of you trend traders are going to pick up on here. You know what else is kind of behind that R1? And I just let it slip out. But what is going on with the power of that move to break that 2? It's actually tying in a trend. You're also getting that intraday sensitivity of that trend breaking up. That's a higher high and a higher low. We just took it out right there. The higher low as well. So the trend, trading that short-term trend, is tied into it. And we're all looking about the reversal of that trend off the bull flag right there. That's what we're really kind of focusing in on here. You know, when does the flag start? So there you go. So is it bouncing off support here? Yeah. Yeah. Now it could come back down here, but again, you know, anything can happen, right? No guarantees across the board, but we're just trying to prove those expectations for those that use this. By the way, just a quick note, TTM, see the compression? Bollinger Band inside the Keltner channel is when you get that TTM squeeze. There's the re-expansion right there. As soon as you get that first one, boom, it starts to break out. Kind of rallies too. So we didn't know it would take out that level. Eventually it did. But having said all that, let's go back in now because it did break above that R1. It is testing it right now. Let's put on at least half a position right here. But let's say if it was 100 shares we were looking at, we want to start a position. Maybe we can add more if it breaks up a little bit higher, takes out another range. But for now, let's go ahead and just add in that 50 share size, 50 position size. By the way, it looks like there is a dividend coming up right there. I did read the disclosures. Yeah, you know, quick note, dividends aren't guaranteed to continue on in the future, but it looks like that one is set, at least the X date right there. Just as a little side note, you can see right there. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, as we look at this too, we want to consider, hey, where might some exit levels be warranted as well, right? And what kind of a move would you be okay with to kind of letting it move a little bit? Now, one of the things we've looked at, we've used ATRs, but a potential exit level could be right down here at this point, and that does give it some flexibility to move. So in other words, if you break support here, what we thought was going to rally higher, you know, we could be wrong at that point because we're breaking into a new low. So that could be an interesting level just to get started on and seeing, you know, how that does unfold. Now, a quick note on that, and I think I actually already brought this up, but yeah, let's see. Yeah, there's no guarantee that execution of a stop order will be at or near the stop price. So we hit that. I just want to double check just to make sure. But we will put a stop just below this guy right here. One of the things too we're looking at is that if we're only using 50 shares, and you know some people might have a stop a little bit higher. What if it takes out one of those pivot points? I'm just saying I don't want to make the pivot points too confusing right now around, exiting this area. You can definitely incorporate that when you get more familiar with it. But for now, folks, we're just looking at that entry, right? The potential entry. It's an entry potential, like it's giving us a sign. So anyways, some traders too might say, hey, get me out, Mike, the day before, the prior day's low. I've seen that before, right? And that gives us a little bit of flexibility to get out right, a little bit quicker, for example. But if we had 100 shares and we're only using 50 of those 100 right now that we want to get in and take this trade, we're only using 50. Well, if it were to go down, it's basically half of the loss if we were able to get out near, that stop level, right? For example, we have it down there. And if prices begin to break higher, what some traders will do to get back to their full position is they might then add an additional 50 shares after it starts to move, right? We're very close to the highs of this pattern. And so it's kind of like, gosh, we're so close to sort of like a resistance level right here. Do we want to add in the additional, do we want to wait? In fact, there's a big round number at 100. But I've seen activity that holds near 100 and then breaks above it. We don't know if that'll happen, but it's holding it fairly closely, which is interesting. So let's just do that. Let's start off with 50. We'll put that stop level just below 90, maybe 91 and a quarter. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to right click again under ask, buy custom with a stop. We could just use an entry right now. In fact, I want to put this as a good tail cancel. I want to put the good tail, a GTC also on that 91.25 for now. We'll just say that could be our potential exit level. And the other thing is like I said, we'll lock these up and we'll just use 50 shares as opposed to 100. Okay. Now let's go ahead and confirm this. Get this trader under our belt. Take a look at the confirmation dialog box. Be sure to review this as you go through, but you can see, yeah, we're just looking to get 50 shares initially on Bungie. Okay. Now, we've got just another couple minutes or so left. And so what I wanted to do was take us into a trade on a company I think many of you probably have heard of. Before I do that, I'm just going to take a quick look down here and see. Yeah, that's another interesting one that we could look at. There are a few of these that we could take a look at in terms of other indicators that we could focus in on, like the anchored VWAP. That might be good. That could be interesting too for a ThinkScript class, actually, that's been coming up. All right. Yeah, and some of the others in there, like the money flow. I don't have time to go through all of those right now. Money flow just simply adds in, if we close higher on the day, it adds in today's volume to the money flow. If we close lower on the day than the prior day, it subtracts it. And a lot of times you can see characteristics of accumulation or distribution over time. But that's one we could definitely touch up on again. All right, so now to the stock that I think many of you may have heard of before. Apple. Okay, pretty straightforward here on Apple. And what have we been seeing with Apple? We've been seeing some of these swing trades, these trends to the upside, but they've been very, very short-term in nature, but still higher highs and higher lows from kind of these short-term pullbacks or consolidation ranges right here. We might have another one right there, just barely getting going. So just as a quick note, let's just pull up our pivot points. This is so cool to do because now we can take a look and see, was that move big enough to get above that R1 level based upon all these, the prior range of days, and hold it, get above it, break above and hold. And you can see too on Apple, we got that as well. What I'm thinking about doing too, I think we could create a ThinkScript too to share in the Thursday class where we could actually spot some of these sort of setups. This took me a while to look through and find some of these that were actually breaking through the R1, but we could actually maybe, there might be enough ThinkScript potential to go ahead and, set up some of these though as well. All right, just one thing to note with ThinkScript too, not guaranteed for timeliness or accuracy on those ThinkScripts, but yeah, as long as the data is right going to the platform, they can work out, they should fulfill the math that's in those scripts. All right, so there's one right there on Apple. Now, we can go back to Apple here, and you can see we're right at, this is an interesting point. The one thing I wanted to note, and I'm actually gonna hold off on this trade. I'm gonna hold off on it, and the reason is this. We're right up to this prior high here, right there, boom. Look at this pullback. Folks, we're virtually at that level. So will that pivot point break? Right? As it's gotten through there, and I would almost certainly say that you probably had some of those pivot point breaks here. Like it's a little bit later than a hold, close above the high of the low day, but maybe more signs to it, perhaps. But we're right at, and this is one thing I learned a long time ago. Do you want to buy when you're right at or right that close to resistance? What are you giving up by just waiting for prices to just inch up a little bit higher and then take the entry, perhaps, after the buy entry, after it clears resistance? Just park that in the back of your minds. We're going to wait on that. So what I'm going to do is I can place a trade on this. I might do it later this week, but we're going to have to get above this with some strength, or get above the prior high, or close above it, because we're virtually right at resistance here. So I'm just going to leave this one because I just think we're too close to the breakout. All right. Does that make sense, folks? All right, folks. Well, hey, if you're finding this kind of content useful, informative, and maybe something you can use within your own swing trades or price patterns, do me a favor, smash that like button. It just lets me know that this kind of content is useful. It's helpful for you, folks. Always be sure to subscribe to our class as well. Connie's got some great content in there and Trader Talks. And yeah, so that's what we did today. We looked at swing trading, really positioning that swing trade. In this case, it was a flag pattern off of Apple, BG, and DHR as our last one here, or our first one, I should say. Of those three, we're tying that in with a pivot point bounce as well to kind of get the timing of the end of that down. So, all right, everybody. Well, hey, I don't think we have any surveys in the class, and so we are all set. It's good to be with you all today. Hey, I look forward to future discussions with you and love to hear any topic requests. If anything does come up, let me know. We'll see what we can take a look at. But on that note, everybody have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks so much, Connie, for your help as well. Great to see those comments, and thank you to our production team as well. On that note, everybody, have a fantastic day. See you next time.